Welcome to Masters of Product Management, powered by Sequent Learning Networks, a show that provides extraordinary insights for product managers who want to go faster and farther in their product management careers.
Hello, this is JJ Rory, Vice President at Sequent Learning Networks. In our Masters of Product Management podcast, we tap into the experiences of people who work in and around product management to help you learn and grow in your product management career. We, in product management, live in complex worlds. We're often solving very complicated problems for various audiences and customers. We are very often using sophisticated, complex technologies or engineering solutions to solve those problems. And we have various audiences to which we must communicate. Effectively communicating to these various audiences and especially making those complex situations understandable and relevant to each one of those is one of the most important skills a product manager has in their professional toolbox. I'm so excited to have this conversation with my guest today. Deepti Tadala is Senior Product Manager for PayPal. She has also held product roles at Synacor and gives back to the product community through her involvement in Products by Women and Product School. Deepti, thanks so much for joining me for this conversation.
Thank you, JJ. It's glad to be here after a very long time.
Yes. You know, for those of you listening, Deepti and I have been talking for, probably a year or more about her coming on the podcast and chatting with me. And so just lots of different reasons we've gone through this path. So I'm so excited that we're finally chatting. So this is going to be fun. And if you guys out there don't enjoy it, Deepti and I will enjoy it anyway. So it'll be fun. But I am very excited to talk to you about this because you've got some great insights. So again, as we kind of set up the conversation, product management is fraught with complexity very often. A big part of our role as product managers is to share complex information with our stakeholders. What have you found that helps you tell the stories and resonate with those various audiences when it comes to telling these kind of matters in a simple way that's going to matter to those various audiences?
It's just the nature of the job, isn't it? So as a product manager, you are not just working with one discipline, A. And second, and this could be controversial, but for me, the way I look at technology is that it's an aid or a tool to solve real problems. At the end of the day, you are working for people, like users out there who don't understand anything about your technology. I can go to them and explain to them about a really complex architecture we built, and they would care less, right?
Yes.
Even within your own company, across various disciplines, say you have design and then you have legal, okay, then you have obviously your engineering and architects. They are so different, right? I can't go to a designer and then start talking to them about some architecture that the engineering has in mind. And I cannot go to a legal and say, hey, this is what I'm building. I need you to, let it through. It's not possible because constructively they have different ideas and thought processes and they come from different places. And as a product manager, being in that center of a certain vision that you might have for your product, it is your responsibility to bring them all on one page. And I can't do that by rambling the same thing to same people, like different people.
Yeah.
So I think the very nature of the job, it requires to deal with different types of audiences with different wiring and thought processes at its core, which means I have to tell the same vision in different ways, in ways that they would understand and they will relate to.
Yeah, absolutely. That is so true. And all of our stakeholders, right? And you can just kind of picture the wheel of all the stakeholders. You mentioned engineering and legal, and there's all, various different ones, sales, marketing, finance, depending on who you work with, supply chain and operations, right? So you're so right. And each one of those has their own expertise and their own field of vision, if you will. But we sit in the center, and we've got to talk to all of those and make sure that they understand. So that's a really good way of saying that. So I've always found that storytelling, and I know that's almost a cliche at this point. It's so almost overused, but it's good grief, it's so important, right? Truly using stories or getting to the crux of like you said, the problem, not the solution. Because that's what we're doing. We're solving problems for people. Tell me a little bit about your experience with storytelling, and if you've developed your skills over that, and how you've approached that, if that's a way that aids you in working with all of these audiences.
Well, just storytelling for me, I think, even as a kid, I remember I've always been a voracious reader. Anything visual usually does not attract me or curb my attention as much as it should. So, but somehow that was ingrained, I think, as a child, to just telling stories, because I remember people like my mother, for example, would be right next to me and say, like, tell me a story, or in general, that's, if it makes sense. But my first job, I remember one of my directors had actually called me out of the blue one day and said, we were actually building apps for sales representatives. And then he said, hey, what's the day in the life of your sales rep look like? I had no clue why he was doing that question. And this was me when I was in management consulting. And I've been working on that product for about an year and a half. I was very naive, just 21, 22 years old, very, very young. And I rambled something off. Because JJ, here's the thing. With me, like the way my brain's built or wired in general, if I don't understand the purpose of what I'm doing, A, I don't enjoy it. B, I just have no clue. Which is why I remember very early on in my career, I remember asking people questions. Why are we building this? Why is this necessary? And I remember people shooting me off and saying, just do what you're being told. It's not important. You got to be 15 years down in the industry to even be concerned about it. But it did not make sense to me, right? So I still kept asking questions. And I'm sure that day when my director asked me that question about what's the day in the life of a sales rep, I rambled something that made sense, because cut to 2 days later, I was in a client meeting and I was the youngest person on that table telling a story. So I think somewhere it's storytelling. You can always, especially with the product discipline growing, there are a number of tools where you can build a story. But I think it's a quality that you probably would have to ingrain within yourself, because you're talking to people as product managers all day, right? So you got to have something. you have to have something that keep you on your toes there.
That's right. I love that story about the day in the life. When we're working with product managers and product teams, we have an exercise where we help them, because it's called the customer narrative, or a day in the life. And it's so interesting to me, because some of these product managers have had a lot of experience and they have a lot of domain knowledge, and they've worked with their various, especially in B2B world, it's a somewhat of a smaller world, and they've worked with these customers for a long time. And it's still very difficult for them to get into that mode, right? What's their day in the life? We center ourselves so often on the product, on our product, or we try to center our customer on our product, if that makes sense. And they don't care about our product, right? It's how their product, it's how our product fits into the rest of their day, and hopefully makes it easier. And in a best case scenario, they're not even thinking about our product. It's just making their day easier. And it's actually a somewhat difficult exercise, right? So I love that you brought that up. So absolutely, that's one of those things that if we can continue to craft those skills, and just like everything else in product management, it's a journey, right? There's no silver bullet of, oh, I'm the absolute expert at that now, I don't have to worry about that anymore. It's constantly kind of working on that. So I love that story. So somewhat related to that, but tell me a little bit about how how you go about breaking down a complex story into digestible narratives, if you will.
So it depends again on the audience that I'm talking. Firstly, my interactions usually almost always start with the problem statement. That's at least when I'm approaching any assignment that I'm given. That's the first thing I try to look at. Why on the earth are we even doing this? Why am I going to spend the next couple of 200 hours, just on this? Why on the earth, right? That question almost always answers and gives you a certain vision or actually a problem statement that you're trying to solve for. Regardless of the audience, I always approach with a problem statement. So, hey guys, this is the problem we are trying to solve for. And secondly, as much as I would like to say that we're building as product managers, you're building great products, it's all visionary. There are always times when you're constrained by times or deadlines, right? Or maybe say, for example, you're making an enhancement to an existing application. And for say a specific country, but it's a global product. You're always working against constraints. And I always go to a team if there are constraints and boundaries that we would have to work within. I always explain the boundaries first. I'm saying, as much as this is a visionary idea and we want to get the best out of it, guys, we have constraints and X, Y, Z. And then we debate about whether that's valid or not. But most often I've seen that when you are open and transparent with people saying these are the boundaries and these are the constraints we have to innovate within, they always almost come around. So almost always starting with a problem statement. And then if there are constraints and boundaries that we have to innovate within, then that's the second thing I always tell people. And then then I share my idea and what I'm thinking about this product or this problem statement in general, and what are the various ways in which we can approach this problem. And then I leave it up to the stakeholders to start coming up with their ideas and their questions first. And then we just iterate over it. So it's a different conversations, right? When you're talking into sales, then you will go with saying, okay, these are my numbers today with this vision or this problem that we've identified, and this solution, your numbers will go by, XYZ. And maybe marketing, we will start talking about, this is what we're doing today, and this is what we need to do tomorrow, and this is how you're going to increase your traction or whatever. I think with me, regardless of the stakeholder, my template has always been current state, future state. What are we trying to solve for? What's the problem? And what is going to be the outcome? Most importantly, I always almost try to give something in for the stakeholder to be excited about. I'm just going to give you an example. Like, say, for engineering, we are building a new solution. The first thing we need to talk about is, are we adding any tech debt? Because that's at the core. That's one thing your technical teams are always very concerned about, adding a lot more tech debt, because you ship a product and you almost always have to come back to it sometimes or most times. Right? Or maybe if it's your design team, innovation, like always give them as much breathing room for innovation as possible. And just being very conscious that I am not going to them with a diagram or a wireframe saying, this is what you have to do. No, let them come up with it. And I will probably just brainstorm with them, but giving them a lot of breathing room to just innovate and do what they're good at. Every person, every stakeholder is great at something. Just give them that opportunity to do what they are good at. And as product managers, not trying to be the expert there. That's all we need to do.
Yes, I absolutely love that. And I think you're so spot on in terms of, really at the core of the stakeholder group or the product ecosystem, as I call it, like all of us working together to product success, we all want the same thing. We all want to be successful. We want our product to be successful. We want our organization to be successful. And if we remember that, coupled with what you just said in terms of each of us have our own expertise and our own part to play in that success. And if you set as a quote unquote leader, right, or influencer in the product manager role, if you set our team up for success, meaning tell the current state, future state, tell the problem, love all of that. That's absolutely right. You set the stage, including the guardrails or the constraints, and then let them do their thing. That's what a leader does, right? I mean, there's so many books, literally books and books and books written about leaders, set their teams up for success and then let them shine. That's kind of what we do in product management, right? You tell them the why, you help them understand why we're doing this and how we can succeed in this, and then you let them flourish. And I think that's really, really good advice there, Deepti. So I guess my last kind of question that I have for you and that I want to chat about is, are there, and it really ties back to that last question, are there words of wisdom you could share on how to best gauge what each audience cares about? Or, again, what's in it for them? We're all after the same success, but at the end of the day, we each have our own motivations, our own incentives, our own professional development plans and managers and that sort of thing. I mean, what's in it for them is a big question that I like to keep in my mind, other than just collective success. How do you know, what's best for engineering versus what's best to talk about with the executive team, for example?
Well, I think the executives are normally, that's the easy part because they for one, they don't have a lot of time, which means they always need to see the bigger picture. Giving the bigger picture is actually very easy because it's all visionary, it's all out there, and it's much easier. But I think it's actually when it comes down to your direct stakeholders in terms of your cross-functional teams, like your engineering, UED, sales, marketing. That's where I think things get trickier. Some things that I've done in the past that worked for me, this is very early on in my career, is I mostly worked with, for a very long time, I worked with engineering and sales, and then to some extent design much later on. But in the very, very beginning, I was actually thrown off because the engineering counterparts that I used to work with were very experienced. They'd been in the industry for like 15 years, and they were talking a language that I had no clue about. Like systems, when I'm talking like literal databases and those real hardcore hardware stuff, I had no clue what they were talking about. Just setting up one-on-ones and saying, hey, I'm a new product manager and this is what I'm doing. This is my approach, because I know you and I will work very closely in the future. What do you need from me? And how would you like me to approach certain things? Because this is my approach, but we can make something work. And I was surprised when some of these stakeholders actually came up with the problems they face with the product managers in just that one-on-one. They said, hey, I'm glad you set this up. These are the problems that we actually had in the past. What can you do about it? And that's especially, this is for anyone starting out in the career as a product manager. But I think over time, as you work with people, you will sense their style of communication, and it becomes very intuitive by then. You know what they want, you know how they will respond to your question or your problem. And then it's going to be a smooth sail. But at the beginning, I think a lot of onus falls on us as product managers to open up those channels of communication across with every stakeholder of yours, because again, everybody has a different style. There's one thing about people in a discipline that have a different approach, and then when you get down at an individual level, every person has just a different style of approaching a problem. So then over time, I think your experience also counts in. And I think just remembering that at the end of the day, you're working with people to build technology or to build your products, right? So if you care about people first, everything else becomes easier. And I always tell people and anyone I talk to outside of my work in general when I'm interacting that you're only as good as your team. As a product manager, you're only as good as your team. Your success is not yours all the time. An entire army of people came in to make your vision happen. So it's almost always never your success. And if you're willing to share your success and give the credit to the team first, you're just building great relationships that will help you build great products at the end of the day.
Yes, absolutely. It's interesting. We talk a lot about empathy in product management and having empathy for our customers and really understanding their problems and what's in it for them and what they need and how can we best solve that. Well, the same goes for our stakeholders, right? What do they need from us? So I love that story and that wisdom. I too, as a young, and this may be a very common thing. I am not an engineer by education or trade, and so I didn't have any technical knowledge really. And so I remember as a young product manager also sitting across from the engineers thinking, oh my God, they think I am just, so useless, and I just was so intimidated and, so embarrassed really that I didn't know what they were talking about. And I tried for a little while to fake it and that just did not work. And so then finally I was just like, guys, that's not what I'm here for. I just don't know. I need you. And I found one or two that I felt comfortable with really kind of being vulnerable with and getting them on board and then opening up to the rest of the team and just saying, look, I'm here for the business. I'm here for the customer. I'm here for the product. I have my role. I'm never going to be able to know all that you know. What do you need from me? How can I help? How can I bring things to the table and vice versa. And just being that transparent about what you're good at, what you're not so good at, and being okay with that, especially, look, it's not our role to know that in product management. But again, as a newer product manager and as someone new on the team, you want to be knowledgeable about everything. So I love that story. It's so right. So everyone listening out there, look, it's about understanding who they are, what they bring to the table, what they need from us. Really just, it's about relationship building as much as communication, and they go hand in hand. So Deepti, I think you're spot on there. It's so important. And I also love what you said about it being easier to talk to the executive team. Some folks don't feel that way, but I'm 100% behind you because I would talk vision all day long. But when you get into the minutia, I'm like, uh-oh. So you're right. Some of us have strengths one way, some of us have strength the other. It's just about, understanding that there's, product management's inherently cross-functional, and we're going to have to go from the vision to the minutia, one meeting to the next, and we're going to have to pivot our audience or pivot our conversation to the audience. So, this has just been an amazing conversation, Deepti. I'm so excited that you were finally able to join me and share your insights and your wisdom and your experience with us. Thank you so much, Deepti Tadala, for joining me today.
Thanks, JJ. This was an amazing conversation. As always, loved chatting with you.
You bet. Absolutely. So thanks again, Deepti. And thank you all for joining us on Masters of Product Management, powered by Sequent Learning Networks. I am JJ Rory, and I look forward to speaking with you on the next episode.
You've been listening to Masters of Product Management, powered by Sequent Learning Networks. If you'd like to take your career to the next level with additional tools, training, coaching, and books, be sure to visit Sequent Learning Networks at sequentlearning.com.